Hello, you're watching Much Ado About Something today, and I'm Donna. Well, I had a viewer from Waynesville request how she wanted to know how I use Mullein and what I do whenever I have a chest infection or say bronchitis or asthma. When I have any kind of condition like that, what do I do? How do I use Mullein so that it relieves that or helps that? Now, I am not a doctor of any kind. I don't have a degree. My familiarity with Mullein is that I grew up in a household. I grew up in a culture of people that used Mullein. They used herbs. And so I'm just familiar with how we used it. But I do research on what we've used in the past so that I have knowledge of what I'm using and why I'm using it. And I always encourage you to do your research on anything that you're going to ingest or use on your body. Always make sure you research it and thoroughly know what you're doing, what its uses are, and consult your healthcare provider if you make any change to your routine. If you add any kind of herbal remedy, or if you do anything different and you have a health condition, you always want to contact your healthcare provider and make sure that those things are appropriate for you and your unique health conditions and situations. There is no one across the board solution for anybody. We're all individuals and we all need individual care. Now, that being said, there are proven things that you can use to soothe yourself whenever you find yourself in a cold or flu-like condition, or even with pneumonia. You know, I have, not too long ago, dealt with pneumonia, and I certainly did use Mullein to help me soothe some of those symptoms that I had as a result to that condition. So, that being said, there are plenty of things that you can research to find information for yourself. There is this one that's the Medical Herbalism book by David Hoffman. And then there are other natural remedy books where you can find things and information, and they're out there and they're easily found wherever books are sold. And so just make sure you do research and you find out what it is you're doing. Now, one of the greatest or easiest and best ways to use Mullein, Verbascum thapsus, that's what we're going to talk about today. That's what I have been asked to share my experience with Mullein, and that's what I'm doing today just for informational and educational purposes. I'm sharing with you what I do with the Verbascum thapsus, the common Mullein. Now, the by far easiest way to use Mullein is to make an herbal tea. It's the easiest way. It soothes and it coats. Mullein is high in mucilage. Now, I have watched videos and I have read, and there are some people that are of the opinion that your Mullein has to be fresh. Well, if our Mullein had to be fresh, we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we? Because usually when you're sick, you don't have access. Say your sickness does not come when Mullein is in bloom, or when you can easily find it. And plus, if you're sick, who wants to go out there and hunt Mullein? That's to use fresh Mullein is not practical, and it's not a reasonable thing that most of us can do. So I always dry my Mullein, and whatever is present in that fresh Mullein is present in this dried Mullein. It's just in a dried form. So that just brings us to the point that when we make our tea, we have to let our tea steep, at least 4 days maybe. You want it to steep at least 4 days. But now I have had distress, and I have made Mullein tea, and I've drank it right after I've made it. Now, Mullein has little fine hairs on it, the Mullein plant, and when you dry the Mullein, the little fine hairs are still in there. Well, the thing about those little fine hairs is they can actually create an expectorant. They can actually make you cough. And sometimes that's what's needed. You need to cough because there's a lot in there that needs to come up and come out. But you can also strain your mullein through a thin, non-absorbent cloth, such as like a patch of sheet or that kind of material. And you can strain your mullein through that, and you won't have those hairs in your tea, and it won't make you cough. It'll just go ahead and do the other properties that it's known for. I've just made notes here, and I'm going to share with you on my notes because I don't have it all in my memory today. When I'm studying it, I can retain a lot of that knowledge, but today I've had a lot of other things going on, so I'm just going to read my notes for you here. Now, mullein verbascum thapsus, it's a lung ally, useful for lung issues such as bronchitis and asthma, flus and colds, and other things like that. And then there's, I'm going to show you how I make that mullein infusion. And I'm also going to make a tincture and just share with you a few ways to do that. Now, if you're making a mullein tea, it's recommended to drink 8 ounces of that 3 times a day. And you want your mullein tea to steep. If you're in real distress as far as you just need comfort and you're looking for something, then you can drink it from, as early as 30 minutes after making your infusion. But most of the time it takes up to 4 hours to extract all of that mucilage and all of those good properties out of your mullein so that you can reap the benefits of what that herb has to offer. Now, there's a lot of ways that people use mullein, the most common being a tea. There's an earache oil, and there's tinctures, and there's some people smoke mullein. I don't smoke anything. I don't see how that can be good for me. So I've never smoked mullein, but I've made tea and the earache oil and tinctures, and so that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'll just let you know a little bit about mullein. The verbascum thapsus. It's an antibacterial, antiviral, and an antifungal. So that is a great thing, and it's sold in oil, powder, elixir, and capsule form. And of course, if you've watched my video, then you've watched me and Donald harvest mullein from the side of the mountain where I grew up. And you'll want to watch videos on how to identify mullein. It's easily identified. It's a very specific plant, and once you see it, recognize it, and know what it is not easily mistaken. It's very mild in that most people that take it have no side effects of any kind. And of course, you always want to check with your healthcare provider, someone that's knowledgeable in health in that way, so that you'll know if that's appropriate for you. It's an antispasmodic. It helps ease spasms or cramps in the muscles, and some antispasmodics work in general. It's a way to produce spasms throughout the body. Others specifically relax the autonomic nervous system, but not necessarily the central nervous system. For this reason, they facilitate a physical relaxation of muscles without necessarily causing a sedative effect. The relaxing expectorant have a localized antispasmodic effect in the respiratory system. And if you've ever had any kind of lung issues, if you ever have a coughing spell, how painful and exhausting that can be. Though it's productive to be able to cough and get things out of your lungs, and that's the reason for coughing, it can also be very exhausting. It can be very traumatic, kind of, when you're battling an illness, when you're battling a cold or a flu or, bronchitis or asthma. But the mucilage in mullein in the verbascum thapsus helps to soothe that. And there's also tannins and other things that are in mullein that helps with the benefits of mullein. It's what it really does is it reduces irritation on the surface of the tissues through a sort of numbing action, thereby bringing relief. It reduces surface inflammation and can create a barrier against infection, which is of great help for wounds and burns. So the mullein plant soothes inflammation in the chest, throat, and sinuses. Now, this is my research that I've done on mullein. Now, I've known this from experience from going up and using mullein, but I didn't exactly know all the details to it until I researched that and found that out for myself. And you can do that too. Research it and find out what exactly does this do. Why is it a good respiratory herbal remedy, and what makes us want to harvest this herb and have it on hand. Like I said before, sickness, illness hardly hits us when we're expecting it. So this is something that you can go ahead and make and have on hand so that when you do get sick, you'll have it there to help relieve, respiratory distress in a mild manner. It's not something for emergencies. If you're severely sick, you need medical attention. You need a healthcare provider. You need to seek help for that. But this is for a relief for common things that you don't normally have to go to the doctor for. It's just like if you get a cold and you go to the drugstore and you buy an over-counter relief product, then this is an herbal relief product. It's not made to cure or to be a sole health, it's not to meet your health needs solely. It's just to bring relief and to treat the things that come with a respiratory infection or respiratory issue that you're having. It can ease and help with that. So I'm just going to show you. I'm just going to show you how to make a few things here. Now, of course, here is my dried mullein. I harvested this in May of 2022. I dried it thoroughly, and I have a video on 2 ways to dry mullein, and you can see how I dried this if you check that out on my channel. Well, I have this dried mullein here, and I have a few jars here, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that. Now we're first going to make a tincture. I have 2 jars here with the good airtight lids on them, to seal them up with. And I'm going to take my dried mullein, and I'm just going to lightly fill these jars up with my dried mullein. I'm not going to pack it in here because I want the menstruum, I want the materials that I put in here to extract this good stuff out of this leaf. I want it to be able to get in there and freely get around into that herb. And so I'm not going to pack that in there real tight. I'm just going to put it in there loosely until it just fills up the jar. Try to get it in the jar. Okay, now there's 2 ways to make a tincture, a herbal remedy that you take by the drops. One of these would be alcohol. This is a vodka that I'm just going to pour over this mullein. And for people, children, for people that can't have alcohol, then this is a vegetable glycerin. And so I'm going to just pour this vegetable glycerin right over this. I'm going to pour this vegetable glycerin just right over this. Mullein that's here in this jar. And this will make a glycerite that can be administered, and it's alcohol free. I want to make sure that that mullein is covered. So you want to just kind of work that herb down into the glycerin to make your glycerite. It's a little thicker, just takes a little bit more work to get it down in there, to get it covered. Now this is the mullein in the alcohol menstruum, or the alcohol. You can see it's in there. You want to leave this. I put it in a dark place. Some people put them in a sunny window. I don't do that. I just put them in a dark place, and I'll leave this for 3 to 6 months. It takes a while for this to be ready. And the same with the glycerin, the glycerite. We've got the mullein in here, and we've got the glycerin in there. And these will extract the properties of this mullein. And then you can put them in, strain them, and store them in a bottle like this. After the 3 to 6 month period has passed, get an amber bottle. This is a sauce bottle that I saved and sterilized and cleaned. So you can strain after 3 to 6 months your tincture into an amber bottle like this for storage. And then to disperse it, you'll want to put it in a little bottle like this that has a dropper. And you might take, depending on your size and weight, a dropper full of this 3 times a day to aid your symptoms. Now, by far, the tea is the best way to use mullein for me. For me, the easiest, most relieving, best way to use mullein is in a tea. And of course, to make your tea, you just want to put dried mullein in. This is a quart jar right here. And because it's a cold quart jar and I'm going to pour hot water, boiling water over it, I'm going to put a metal spoon in it to absorb the heat so that this jar doesn't bust. But you want to do the same thing. You want to put your dried mullein. You can even use fresh for this tea mixture, of course. But you just want to kind of loosely fill up your jar. With your dried mullein. Put a metal spoon in to absorb the heat. Pour your boiling water over your mullein. Just kind of work it around just a little bit to make sure everything's saturated. And you want to put on your lid. Now, airtight or whatever, this is the lid that I have. So this is the lid that I'm using. And you let this steep. Just let this herbal infusion infuse. And you want to do that for at least 4 to 6 hours before you drink it. So you want to make it ahead and strain it. If you don't want the little hairs, the little expectorant properties of this mullein, then you want to strain it through a linen, non-absorbent, small weave piece of cloth, clean cloth. You'll strain this herb and just drain the tea out and then drink the tea. And you can drink that tea, 8 ounces of it at least 3 or 4 times a day, and that'll bring relief to respiratory conditions. It does for me. That's how I use it. This is the way I use it the most. There is also an eardrop that's used, Mullein eardrops. We use this whenever we have, a lot of times when you have any kind of respiratory throat problems, it also can affect your ears. And so that Mullein ear drops is just an infusion of oil like this, but I put dried herbs in a jar. Just take a clean jar, and just like we did with the tinctures, you just put your dried herb in there, loosely packed to fill the jar. That's how I do it, so that the material or liquid that you're using to extract the properties of this herb can get in there and get around your herb. And then just use oil. You can use olive oil, whatever kind of oil that you usually use. A lot of people like olive oil, and in fact, that's what we used growing up. We used olive oil for our eardrops, and they called it sweet oil. So you just put your oil over your dried herb. You want to use dried herbs in this case because you've got oil and you don't want any moisture in there in that herb when you're putting your oil in, because you just want the benefits of the oil. And this is just like the tincture. You let this sit in here for 3 to 6 months. In a nice place. It's okay if it gets a little bit warm, because the warmth will help it extract faster. But I don't ever set it in a hot, sunny window. And you just close up your oil infusion and you let it infuse. You let the oil infuse with the mullein and get the properties of the mullein into the oil. And then after 3 to 6 months, you put it in a dropper bottle like this. And you can use this several times. I've got a video where I'm putting it in Donald's ear. I think I still have that. If I do, I'll include that, and you'll get to see how we use those whenever somebody has an earache or ear irritation coming from a cold or a sore throat or anything like that. These eardrops really help. And so that's coming from the oil infusion. And then the last step, of course, you want to label anything that you have. And you want to be sure and label it, because you think that you'll remember. But if you have more than one thing going on, it is just hard to remember. And a lot of these things can look alike if they're not labeled. So you want to be sure that you always label whatever you do. and because you're going to count the months. In 3 months, you want to know that this is ready to be strained and put into a small container so that you can use it whenever you need it. Your tea, you don't have to label because you'll probably be drinking that in 4 to 6 hours or within 8 hours. And of course, once this is cooled and you strained it, and if you don't consume it, immediately, you want to make sure you put this in the refrigerator. This tea, it'll have a good dark color and it'll bring a lot of relief. Well, those are the 4 ways that I use Mullein. And the main number 1 way, of course, is the tea. And then the number 2 way would be the oil infusion, because I use the oil drops. And then you make the tinctures, and you can take a dropper of those several times a day, and that'll help you. It's the mucilage and the tannins and the wonderful things that's in the mullein that helps with the respiratory issues. It just brings relief and helps you recover from that. Well, of course, I thank you for joining me today, and I'm going to include that clip where I'm putting oil drops in Donald's ear. If I can find that, I hope I can. I hope you have a good day, and like always, until next time. Okay, this morning Donald's feeling an earache. So I've got the Mullein drops warming up right here in this glass of warm water. And we're going to go ahead and put some ear drops in his ears. If you hear sound in the background, the kids are watching TV, and there's nothing I can do about that today. That's something Madeline has to do while we are busy doing something else. Now here's my patient who has the earache today, and it's probably from the same sinus infection that we've been passing back and forth to each other. So Ellie's going to hold the camera for us. Hey, Ellie.
Hi, everyone.
She's our good helper. So she's going to hold the camera for us while we get some eardrops, Mullein eardrops in Grandpa's ear today to help his ear feel better. Now we're massaging the ear here a little bit so that the ear canal will just soak in those eardrops.
So his ear will feel better.
Yeah. Now Grandpa's going to lay there for a little bit. We're going to go ahead and put this cotton in so that when he gets up, it won't spill all over the place.
So it won't drip.
Now we're not sticking it deep in the ear, we're just resting it on the outside of the ear so that the eardrops won't run out when he raises up. Now he'll be laying here for a little bit, a few minutes, to let those eardrops just soak into his ear. Okay. And that's how we use the Mullein eardrops.